Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, and that's New Comic Book Day, when malevolent man-babies waddle to their LCS, their local comic shop, usually wearing ill-advised cargo shorts, and stare at all the new releases without actually forking over any money for them. and I used to put up with those ranks in order to go to my local comic shop and buy weekly comics of my own, what are now called floppies. Individual stapled pages of individual issue comic books. And I gradually worked my way out of that. I've had lapses here and there, including a couple on this channel, but I've gradually worked my way out of it in favor of buying the higher ticket items that are reprint volumes, omnibus reprint volumes of older stuff that I know I like and that I know I will reread, and therefore that belongs in a book collection. I have a large collection of graphic novels now that I look at regularly. I go back to them regularly. And I'm always interested, since reprint culture has taken hold of the comic book world, the makers of superhero comic books from Marvel and DC know that their audience is much older than it was originally, and that there might have a bit more disposable income. So they're reprinting everything, gradually, in one form or another, reprinting everything. This summer is, in fact, going to have a few reprint volumes that I'm really looking forward to. So I go looking for them at my LCS, which is on Newbury Street. I go looking for, I prowl the remainder sections, because when those hardcover omnibus editions come out, they're murderously overpriced. Just murderously. Ridiculously so. 15, 20 times the price of what it costs to make the thing, which is, I guess you'll have collectors. They know they'll have collectors that will snatch them up at that price, but I always wait. These things are remaindered like anything else, and then you can get them at a much lower price, something you're really going to enjoy. And since we're talking about stuff that's 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, I can wait. I can wait a few more years until the price comes down, unless I'm just dying for something. There's one particular thing coming out this summer that I am going to buy the day it comes out, regardless. So I go to my local comic shop looking for that, and if I find a floppy or two that I want in addition to that, well, that's just gravy. Like, for instance, Marvel Comics has just recently relaunched floppy individual comics of Conan the Barbarian and Savage Sword of Conan, and they're incredibly good. They read like nothing else that I've seen in modern Marvel, and I've been reading those. I missed a couple of issues for one reason or other, probably because it was freezing cold and pitch dark during the day on the Wednesday in question. And I found the other day that when I went to a new comic shop and saw their back issues of Conan and Savage Sword of Conan, I didn't remember which ones I had and didn't have. So with those, with Conan the Barbarian and Savage Sword of Conan, I have basically stopped getting the floppies. Now I will just wait and buy the trade paperbacks whenever they appear. But today, at the local comic shop, I found both. I found both a floppy and a remainder of a hardcover. I want to show you the remainder first, because it's a gem. It's a gem. It's this. The New Teen Titans, Volume 1, collecting, I don't even know, 20 issues of the New Teen Titans, plus the original appearance that they made in a Superman team-up comic called DC Presents. The DC Powers That Be decided to give a kind of alternate version of the team's first meeting, a tryout run in DC Comics Presents, to see if anybody would respond to it. The fan response was overwhelming. And in 1980, when the whole world made sense, DC launched the New Teen Titans. Now, this was a team, we've seen it before on this channel. This was a superhero team that was originally created, 1980, so 30 years ago, 30 years before that, of the teen sidekicks of DC superheroes. Originally, it was Robin the Boy Wonder, Aqualad, the teen sidekick of Aquaman, and Kid Flash, the teen sidekick of Barry Allen, the Flash. And then when that idea took off, half a century ago, the roster was added. They added Speedy, the teen archer sidekick of Green Arrow, and they added Wonder Girl, the teenage sidekick of Wonder Woman. And that made for a fascinating team. That original 5, or original 4, if you want to leave out one of those 5, those 5 are my idea of the original Teen Titans. And they made for a fascinating dynamic. Even then, back then, in the whenever the Titans debuted, in the late 50s, early 60s, something like that, where personality wasn't a big deal. The teen sidekicks were made their personality was a kind of an echo of their adult counterparts. Even then, it was fascinating, and it just got more so. The original Teen Titans, I have a gigantic volume of the original Teen Titans, and it got more and more fascinating as it went along. And as I mentioned on this channel, one of the really interesting dynamics of that early team was the power imbalance, which was drastically different than any other super team that had ever yet existed. You had Robin, the boy wonder. He doesn't have any superpowers. He's a trained gymnast and detective. You have Speedy. He's a trained archer. We don't know if he has any training in any other way. Does he know martial arts? Can he run a mile? I don't even know. I don't think it was ever addressed. That version of Aqualad was just a curly-haired dreamboat who could breathe underwater and, by some unknown reason, command sea life to do whatever he wanted. But other than that, he had no superpowers. In fact, his breathing underwater was a bit of a liability because he needed to keep doing it or he'd die. And the Flash, Kid Flash back then, there was no Speed Force. When the original Teen Titans was launched, the Flash and Kid Flash just ran really fast. They could, every once in a while, if a writer remembered, they could vibrate through a solid object, but there was nothing, none of this cataclysmic stuff that has gone on with the reinvention of the Flash, giving him an extra-dimensional, supernatural ability called the Speed Force. There was nothing like that. Flash was just super strong. If you walked up behind him and hit him with a lead pipe, he would be out cold, that sort of thing. And then there was Wonder Girl, who had been given superpowers on Paradise Island and was super strong, super fast. She could fly. She could deflect bullets with her bracelets, and for all we know, just like the original Wonder Woman, was probably good and properly bulletproof even without her bracelets. It was a dramatic imbalance. The boys on the team were drastically overpowered by the one girl on the team, and I loved it. I loved it at the time. I thought it added such a dynamic because you don't, the writers who had come along and had perfectly good gimmicky plot lines for the original Titans then had to deal with having an actual superpowered character on, someone who could go toe to toe in the same league as Supergirl and Wonder Woman and Superman. What do you do when she's the only character on the team like that? And the Titans were successful. People loved it. And readership eventually waned. The creative team changed one too many times. The stories became a little too maudlin, and the whole thing was mothballed. And in 1980, Marv Wolfman and George Perez decided to try to tempt lightning to strike twice. In 1975, at the other company, at Marvel Comics, an attempt had been made to redo the X-Men. They had also been mothballed. They had also undergone a maudlin tendency towards maudlin in the storylines. The later stories hadn't been all that good. The book shifted to reprints and then was mothballed. And after a while, a creative team over at Marvel decided to revamp the X-Men. And they had a formula. Keep the core of the team and add new members. So it's not a total revision. You're not saying these are the new X-Men and nothing is what you remember. There wasn't even, the temptation at the time would have been to have just Professor X, the leader of the X-Men, and then have him have a whole new team. And there wasn't even that. They didn't even do that. The revamp of the X-Men kept Jean Grey and Cyclops and Professor X, and then added on to the team from there. And it worked. Oh, it worked. It was a huge success. Even before the character of Wolverine, who'd been introduced in the Hulk earlier on, even before that character took off, the new X-Men was a huge hit. And that was in 1975. It was going strong. It was barreling along by 1980. And Marv Wolfman decided to try it with Marvel, and he did not stray from that formula. So when he relaunched the Titans, we have a core of familiar characters. We have Kid Flash. That's him right there. We have Robin, the boy wonder, who, of course, unquestionably always leads the team. He has no superpowers. But there's never any question that anyone else is going to lead the team but him. That's true even back in the 1950s. And that also is fascinating. And we also have Wonder Girl. Those three return for this new team. And there's one other old face that returns, and that is Beast Boy, this green guy right there who can change into animal forms. They're always green, but he can change into animals. And we know him. He was familiar because he originally, decades before the Teen Titans were relaunched, he actually wanted to leave his own super team of the Doom Patrol, which is more like a family, and join the Teen Titans, and they told him no, that he was too young. Even though I guess he was a teenager. Maybe he was just 12 or 13. Maybe that was too young. I don't know. But Marv Wolfman decided that by now, even at the slow pace that time passes in comic books, Beast Boy was old enough to join the Titans. And so they gave him a name, Changeling. They changed his name. And it's the same character, same backstory and everything. Another familiar face for longtime DC readers. And Marv Wolfman and George Perez added characters. They added Cyborg, a young high school athlete who has an accident and in the last minute to save his life is made into a 2/3 machine. There was Starfire, somewhat blandly conceived alien princess with energy wielding powers, and there was Raven, an enigmatic telepath and teleporter who has a dark mystery behind her, and she's the one who originally assembles the team. And it was fantastic. Even that preview in DC Comics was fantastic. Could see immediately that it was a hit. And it went on from there. It had a first issue, and then it was just off to the races. It was the X-Men all over again. It was a gigantic hit. And this is the first 20 issues. This is that enchanted first 20 issue run, plus that DC Comics Presents thing, and a couple of others. I think this has a couple of miniseries type things that were done, spotlights on particular characters. And I was reading this at the time. I got it at the time. I was a big fan of the original Teen Titans. So, of course, I was going to get an update. And whereas I wasn't a big fan of the original X-Men, I got that mainly because, I hate to say it sounds so shallow, but I got the giant size new X-Men #1 and X-Men 94. They restarted the original with the original numbering. I got those mainly because they had utterly incredible cover art by Gil Kane. And I was willing to take it and maybe see what the rest of it was about. I was a shallow comic buyer back in the time. I know it looks strange that I'm talking about that when I am in fact 28, but math is difficult, so let's not dwell on it. But this original run of the new Teen Titans is amazing in that George Perez, it was I've mentioned him many times before. He's a standard great late 20th century comic book artist, either for Marvel or for DC. He went wherever and left a huge mark on the industry. Just amazing. What he can do with the kinetics of a story are just amazing. And his work got better on the Teen Titans as it went along, almost issue by issue you could see it. So that at one point, I think it's New Teen Titans #4, there was a fill-in with artist Kurt Swan, who was famous 30 years before for creating the visual icon of Superman, really putting a stamp on the character of Superman. I love Kurt Swan's artwork for Superman and the Legion of Superheroes, but by this point, in 1981 or whatever, when he did a fill-in for the Teen Titans with characters he clearly didn't understand, fans weren't happy with that fill-in. And then it went right back to George Perez, and he just kept getting better and better. Page designs, panel-by-panel breakdowns, character emotions on their faces, all sorts of innovations. Wonderful stuff. Wonderful. And I had all of these original issues. I've read them and reread them. I was tempted by trade paperbacks, little collections of trade paperbacks that came out from time to time. But I knew that I wanted something like this. I knew that sooner or later something like this would happen. And here it is. So this was a remainder, so it was $40, a significant improvement over whatever. What was the original price on this thing? Do I even want to know? Well, no, it's covered over, but it's probably $100 and something, and that's too much for something like this, for something that I've read many, 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 many times. This has all of the hallmarks of a new series. Raven's story gets darker and darker until the Titans don't know if they can trust her. Starfire has a story that takes place in outer space, a story that she has brought to Earth with her. There are love triangles, love interests. There's also, of course, the obligatory issue where the Teen Titans fight the Justice League. And there's also one where the Teen Titans, a little bit innovative, where the Teen Titans face off against the actual Titans of Greek mythology. And it all somehow works. I can't wait to read. I haven't sat down and read just a long run of the Teen Titans in, I don't even know, probably 35 years. And I would have done it with my individual issues. Now I can just hold a book in my lap and do that. Can't wait. Can't wait. So that was the anthology that I found today on New Comic Book Day. But I also found a floppy issue. And it's the first issue. And oh my God, can I recommend it? It is amazing. I thought I was going to buy it. I looked at the listings ahead of time. I always do, just to see. And it's frustrating because half the time what I see in the listing isn't at my comic shop. My comic shop doesn't really care about comics. Comics are tucked away in the far back dark corner of the second floor, well past the Funko Pops and all of the t-shirts and novelty items and avocado pillows. So they don't always get everything. There's a specialty comic shop another 5 or 6 blocks away that does get everything. But I don't care about this enough anymore to bother. I ought to. Maybe now that the weather's not absolutely freezing, I might do that. But I was going to get this thing anyway, at least the first issue, just for sentimental sake. I had no idea it would be this good, so I want to recommend it to you. I want to show it to you. It's Star Trek Year 5, number 1, with a cover by Greg Hildebrand, who I didn't even know was still alive, and here he is doing a commission for a cover. And as you can see, this is our original cast and crew. This is the original Star Trek. I guess IDW must have the rights, must have the franchise to Star Trek. And it must extend quite a bit, because another Star Trek series that they're doing is one in which, I don't know if I can show it to you, there's one in which Q, the all-powerful extra-dimensional entity from Star Trek The Next Generation, that who can do anything, basically. He can do anything, basically. He's the Squire of Gothos. He's Trelane, the Squire of Gothos, only for The Next Generation. In IDW's other Star Trek show called The Q Conflict, he assembles all of 4 iconic crews. I guess Star Trek Enterprise was not going to be, they're not going to bother with that. It's too bad, because that was a terrific crew. But there we have it. There's the original crew, The Next Generation. Only The Next Generation is late in their career, whereas the original crew is early in theirs. Plus Deep Space Nine, and my beloved Star Trek Voyager. That almost would be worth doing, except that's a cast of 30 people, and I don't know that you could do any justice to any of them at all. This is different, however. Let me give you the credits here. The writers are Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly, and the artist is Stephen Thompson. And between them, they came up with an inspired idea. The reason this is called Year 5 is because in the original Star Trek, as you know, if you've memorized the opening monologue, these are the voyages of Star Trek Enterprise. Her 5-year mission to explore. It's the original NCC 1701. No bloody A, B, C, or D. Had only a 5-year remit, and then they would return to Earth, and the ship would be decommissioned, remade, refitted, the crew would be promoted, move on to different things, and someone else would go out and explore the wilds of space. That's baked right into the original Star Trek series. And one of the reasons why we don't tend to remember that is because, unlike any other Star Trek spin-off, the original Star Trek, the greatest Star Trek of them all, didn't have a proper beginning or a proper ending. We never see Kirk's first voyage on the Enterprise with his crew, or even with some familiar faces and others not. And we certainly don't see the Enterprise come home. Imagine what an episode that would be. Someday, computer simulations will allow for our original cast, in their youth, to have 2 more seasons of adventures and then come home. On the big screen, or on a DVD, or whatever the technology is at the time. Someday that will happen. We have endless recordings of these people. We have all of the sound for all of the sound effects and special effects. That will happen. I am positive. I don't know if I'll live to see it, but I wouldn't be surprised if I do. I cannot shake Star Wars Rogue One has Peter Cushing in it as Grand Moff Tarkin. I cannot shake that. I can't shake that, and I can't shake the fact that in the Captain Marvel movie, Samuel Jackson is in his early 40s. And you lose track of the fact that that's not what you're looking at. And that's in the infancy of the technology. So it will happen. I feel certain it will happen. But in the meantime, fans come into Star Trek when things are still relatively new, but nevertheless ongoing. And we leave long before the Enterprise is due to come back to Earth. And that's what this is. This is the inspired idea of this series is taking place in Year 5 of the Enterprise's voyage, and the artwork is amazing, just incredible, and the storyline, the artwork and the conception, I was fine with. I was thinking, okay, well, that's 2 boxes checked. But I have read every original series Star Trek comic book that has ever been made, and most of them have been so awful, just so awful. It's so hard. You'd think it wouldn't be. These characters have been a part of our collective consciousness for 70 years. You'd think it wouldn't be hard, but it's so hard to get these characters right. You get one of them right, you're going to get one of them wrong. Even devoted fans who've been watching forever, you give them a contract to write a novel or a remit to write a comic book, and some character will end up being wrong. Where it's just tinny on your ear. Unfortunately, in this comic, the closest one who comes to being wrong is Spock, who is, one of the most important ones to get right. Kirk is done perfectly. McCoy is done perfectly. Scotty is done perfectly. And the story, in addition to the characters, the story has heart. Real heart. Genuine excitement and real heart. I simply cannot recommend this enough. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Not just for the hijinks of the storyline, but also for the personal moments. Kirk has had a message from Earth here in year 5. He and the crew and the ship are about a mission. They're just going on about their mission. But Kirk is preoccupied, as McCoy notices right away. He's had a message from Earth that when he returns, he will be an admiral. McCoy is ecstatic. Imagine Jim Kirk shaping the destiny of Starfleet. Who would we want better to do that? But Kirk doesn't want that. He doesn't want that at all. That's a wonderful moment. It's a wonderful scene. In fact, I don't know anything about the copyright issues of comic books, but I want to read you a bit because it's wonderful. Kirk's talking to McCoy about how when he was a boy, his father read him books back in Iowa. Not data bads, but actual books. And he didn't give them to Jim Kirk to read. He read them out loud. He said that was the way they were meant to be enjoyed. And specifically Homer. And Kirk says Homer had repeated phrases he could throw into the mix in case he ever forgot a line. They were always descriptions of main characters. Zeus, who loves the lightning. Aeneas, the long-haired. Achaean. Odysseus, experienced in loss. All old Homer was doing was buying time to remember his next line, but those descriptions lasted thousands of years. One man said it enough, and that's what those people became to history. There's not a day goes by that I don't say it. Captain James T. Kirk of the USS Enterprise. I just don't know who I am if I'm not. Fantastic. Fantastic. And that's what this is. If you are a fan of the original Star Trek, you have got to hunt down this series and read it. Don't trade wait for it. Don't wait until it comes out in a collection. You've got to find these issues. They are the season of the original Star Trek that we didn't get. So in other words, my local comic shop day for Wednesday Comics was a real success. An old thing that I love and the new interpretation of an old thing that I love. Fantastic. So I'm going to have a lot of fun reading ahead of me, and I wanted to share it with you. so I actually do recommend the original run of the Teen Titans as well. It's all in trade paperbacks at your local comic shop and at your bookstore. So if you're interested, you could try one, probably at your library too. But Star Trek Year 5, if you're a Star Trek fan and you go to your comic shop, don't miss it. Find it. Make them order it. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.